The ad was posted in a place that pretended to be legitimate, a normal job board, a normal listing, remote, contract, content, post-production. The pay was obscene. That should have been the warning, the kind of money that doesn't want questions attached. I was behind on rent. My student loan was past the "we are disappointed" phase, and in the "we will ruin your life" phase. I hadn't told anyone how bad it had gotten. I was still doing the normal human thing where you smile at people while thinking about how much time you have left before you start selling your furniture. I applied. They replied within 10 minutes. The email was short, clean, professional. A file attached with a test clip and instructions. Stabilize, color correct, remove background noise, add intro sting, provided, export settings, provided, no company name, no logo, just a sign-off. K. I downloaded the test clip. It was a shaky phone video of a room that looked like a cheap rental. Generic couch, cheap blinds, a lamp too bright for the space. A man sat in a chair with his hands tied. I didn't realize they were tied at first. The video was framed casually, like someone filming a party, like someone who didn't want to admit on camera that this was staged. 2 other people were in the frame. Both wore plain black masks. Not theatrical. Not a Halloween thing. The kind you'd buy in bulk. The man was crying, not screaming, not pleading. Just crying in the exhausted, defeated way you cry when you already know you're alone. The clip ended before anything happened beyond that. I sat there longer than I should have, waiting for my brain to supply an explanation that made it normal. My first thought was that it was a kink video. My second thought was that it was some fake, edgy short film. My third thought was the one I didn't want. I wrote back anyway. I told myself the same thing everyone tells themselves, right before they step into a doorway they won't be able to back out of. I need the money. Kay responded with a contract in plain English. Strict NDA. Payment in crypto or wire. Weekly deliverables. A private portal with 2-factor access. I signed. The portal login arrived with a polite sentence that felt worse than any threat. Welcome to the queue. The first full assignment was labeled episode 114. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that the test clip was bait for an edgy porn brand. Maybe that the real work would be something else. Number. Episode 114 opened with a logo I had to add to every piece after that. A simple white icon. No text. Like a simplified blade or maybe a tooth. It wasn't clear enough to be a symbol. It was clear enough to be a brand. The video itself was longer and cleaner than the test clip. Multiple angles. High quality lighting. Good audio. A detached efficiency. That was the part that really got into me. Not the fear. Not the cruelty I was starting to understand. The production value. You don't invest that kind of effort unless you plan to do it again. Unless there's a schedule, a budget, an audience that expects consistency. The victim was a woman. I won't describe what happened in detail. You don't want that in your head. I don't want to help plant it. But I can tell you what made it worse than a nightmare. They talked the whole time. Not like villains. Not like lunatics, like co-workers. One of them complained about a flight delay. The other talked about a bad meal at a restaurant. The woman was alive and terrified in the same frame as casual conversation about airline policies. I edited it the way they wanted. Cut the hesitations, clean up the audio, balance the blacks, make everything sharp. I told myself I wasn't responsible for what I was seeing. I told myself I was just a technician. You know how that sounds. The first payment hit my account 2 hours after delivery. I stared at the numbers. Then I closed my laptop. Then I opened it again. The next job was waiting. I didn't sleep that night, but not because I was too horrified, because I was too alert. Like a part of me had been activated. Like I had stepped into a world that was more real than my own. And now my brain refused to pretend that my old problems mattered. Episode numbers climbed backward and forward depending on what they needed. Sometimes they'd send specials. Sometimes archives. The archives were grainier, older, different rooms, different styles, but the same brand, the same logo, the same clean and different efficiency of violence made into content. The editing notes were detailed and almost funny in their normality. Remove the coughing fit at 12:03, breaks immersion. Add subtitle card for name and age. Reduce exposure in corner. Face should be less visible. This was a business. I would finish one and tell myself I was done. Then another message would arrive, and I would open it. I started watching the raw files the way you might stare at a car crash from a safe distance. You don't want to look, but your body won't let you turn away, because your brain is trying to learn how the world can suddenly become fatal. After 2 weeks, I noticed patterns. Most victims were strangers, but not all. Sometimes the footage started with a short interview. Name, age, a question that felt ceremonial. Do you know why you're here? The answers were never satisfying. Some didn't know. Some guessed wrong. Some begged so hard it was hard to listen. Others said something that chilled me in a quieter way. I'm not the first, am I? I didn't know what that line would do to me until I heard it. Because it wasn't terror. It was perspective. She wasn't just scared of dying. She was scared of being one item in a list. That was the real horror of the place I'd joined. Not one monster, a system. The portal had a chat tab I never used. Until Kay sent me a message there. Not an email. Not a task note. A direct line. You're fast. You don't flinch. I stared at that sentence. I wanted to write back that I was flinching constantly, that I felt sick, that I couldn't eat. But I didn't write any of that, because I didn't want to be observed. So I wrote the safest lie in the world of work. Thanks. Happy to help. Kay replied with a new tab unlocked on my account. Community. I clicked it. I wish I hadn't. It was a forum. Threads, comments, ratings. People discussing these videos like sports. Not just praising violence, critiquing it. Too quick. Too messy. Not enough build-up. Bad lighting in the third act. I read a comment that still makes my stomach tighten when it surfaces in memory. Love the new room aesthetic. Feels more intimate. What kind of person writes that? A person who isn't a person anymore. A person for whom the idea of another human being is background texture. I closed the tab and tried to breathe. Then I did something stupid. I started scrolling through older posts, hoping to find proof these were fake. I told myself there had to be a thread where someone admitted it was all staged, all performance, all elaborate horror roleplay. There wasn't. What I found instead was a post by a user with a high reputation score. They wrote, "Appreciate the consistency. I've followed since the early days. Never misses a drop. Never misses a drop. Like a podcast. Like a weekly show." I looked at the calendar and realized I had edited 9 videos in 14 days. That meant they had more editors than me. Or I wasn't seeing everything. Or both. The truth was obvious. This scale required infrastructure. I tried to quit. I drafted a short email. Polite, neutral, normal. Due to personal circumstances, I'm ending my contract effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity. I stared at it for 10 minutes before hitting send. A reply came almost instantly. Not from K. From an account named ADMIN. One line. Your contract ends when we say it ends. I didn't answer. I took my laptop to the kitchen table and started wiping it, deleting files, clearing cache, pulling down Cloud Sync. That's when I found the folder I hadn't downloaded. I swear I didn't. A fresh directory sitting in my local drive like it had always belonged there. /deliverables/preview. Inside were 3 short clips, all of them unedited, all of them shot from the same angle. A living room I recognized because every apartment living room is a cousin to every other. Neutral furniture, cheap rug, not enough art on the walls. In the first clip, a man sat in a chair, terrified. In the second clip, the chair was empty. In the third clip, a person stepped into frame and leaned close to the camera, adjusting it with calm hands. The person wasn't wearing a mask. It was me. Not my face. Not my body. But my apartment. My lamp. My cheap blinds. My couch. The exact placement of my furniture. Even the scratch on the floor by the coffee table I had always meant to fix. I threw up in the sink. I shut the laptop so hard the hinge snapped. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We can do this the easy way. I typed with shaking fingers. What do you want? The reply was simple. Work. That was all. No money talk. No threat spelled out. Because they didn't need to spell it out anymore. I didn't sleep. I sat with the lights on, listening for the sound of someone walking in a hallway, the click of a door that wasn't mine, the soft negotiation of a lock that might already be compromised. Morning was gray and thin. I called the police. I didn't tell them everything. I told them someone was threatening me, that I believed I was being watched. I didn't mention the portal. I didn't mention what I had been editing. because I could already imagine how it would sound out loud. The officer was polite. He asked if I had enemies, asked about past relationships, asked if I had been online too much lately. He asked if I was stressed. He asked if I had tried therapy. He looked around my apartment with human boredom. And then he left. When the door closed, I realized the worst part. I had just confirmed my address to a system that was already inside my life. Kay messaged me again that afternoon. "You're in deeper than you understand." I didn't reply. A new task appeared. Episode 128, Priority. I didn't open it. I unplugged my router. I turned off my phone. I tried to think like someone who still believed in normal escape routes. Then there was a knock at my door. A normal knock. Not a dramatic pounding. Not a coded rhythm. Just the kind of knock a neighbor might do when they want to ask about a package. I didn't move. The knock came again. Then a voice. A woman. Calm. Patient. "Hi. This is building management. We need to check something in your unit." It was the wrong voice. There was no building management woman. There was a guy named Victor who hated eye contact and always smelled like cheap coffee. I didn't answer. A pause. Then, "We can do it with you or without you." I backed away from the door. My apartment had one real exit. I went to the window and looked down. 3rd floor. Not fatal, but enough to break something important. I heard movement in the hall. Metal against metal. A soft scraping. A tool. Then the lock clicked. Not struggled with. Not forced. As if someone had always had the key. The door opened. 2 people stepped inside. No masks. No rush. They looked like regular professionals. Office casual. Clean shoes. One carried a small hard case. The other had a phone out, not filming me, just checking something. The one with the case said my name in a voice that was almost kind. "We don't want to hurt you." I laughed. It came out cracked and ugly. "You run a murder site." He nodded like I'd mentioned a company policy he couldn't change. "People like what they like." The other person looked around my apartment. She smiled at my editing setup. "You have good taste in monitors." She said it like a compliment. This was when I realized something that made my skin go cold. They weren't here to threaten me. They were here to onboard me in person. The man opened the hard case. Inside was a laptop. Brand new, no branding. A sealed box with peripherals that were too expensive for casual use. He placed it on my table like he was delivering a work device. "Your current machine is compromised by your fear," he said. That sentence still plays in my head sometimes. Compromised by your fear. Like fear was a software bug. He slid a paper across the table. No letterhead, no signature, just a list of rules. Use the provided hardware only. Do not contact law enforcement again. Do not attempt to access community pages. Deliver on schedule. You are not a prisoner if you cooperate. I stared at Rule 5. "You wrote this for other people," I said. The woman shrugged. Some people need structure. I looked toward the door. 2 more people stood in the hall, not blocking me, just existing there with quiet authority. I sat down. That was the moment I surrendered. Not because I believed them, because the alternative was to roll dice with my life in a game I didn't know the rules to. They left me with the laptop and a small card. On it was a single sentence: make it clean. When I opened the new portal, everything looked different. It wasn't just a list of episodes. It was a pipeline. I could see roles: capture, processing, edit, subtitles, archive, distribution. There were dozens of names and handles, a machine with many hands. Kay was just a manager. The idea that I could quit and make it vanish was childish. A new message arrived. You will edit your own orientation footage. I stared at that. Then a file appeared. Orientation. Raw. I opened it. It was the footage of my apartment from the preview folder. The chair. The angle. The test-like setup. My home turned into their set. At the end of the clip, the woman who had entered earlier stood in frame and spoke toward the camera. This editor is joining us voluntarily. She turned and looked at me off screen. Say your line. I heard my own voice in the raw audio, thin and dead. I'm joining voluntarily. I didn't remember saying it, which scared me more than if I had, because that meant shock had eaten a hole in my memory. The note attached to the task read, trim silence, add logo, add music, export. That's what they wanted. Not just compliance, craft. They wanted me to make my own coercion look smooth. I considered sabotaging it, adding a hidden message, a glitch, a traceable watermark. But I remembered Rule 2. And I remembered the lock clicking like a friend. So I made it clean. Over time, I learned how the system breathed. When they were active, how they rotated content, how they used different front sites to launder traffic. I learned they preferred editors who didn't ask about sources. They preferred people who could turn horror into something crisp enough to consume. That was my new job, taking out the stutters, the messy parts, the human delays. I was sanding down suffering into a product. Weeks passed. I ate, I slept, I worked. I became the thing they had seen in me during that first test. Fast. The money kept coming, but now it felt obscene in a different way. More like hush money. More like a collar made of digits. I stopped answering friends, stopped posting online. I became a ghost with rent paid on time. The worst part wasn't fear anymore. It was the slow expansion of numbness. At first I'd pause, pace, try to breathe through the nausea. By week 6, I was taking notes. By week 8, I was anticipating their preferences. I started to hate myself in a colder, more practical way, because I was getting good at it. Then I received episode 162. Priority. Short run time. The thumbnail was different. Not a studio. Not a rental room. A car interior. Low light. A phone camera pointed at someone in the back seat. The victim looked familiar in that blurry, terrible way, where your brain wants to dismiss recognition as coincidence. I opened the raw file. The woman in the back seat was a local journalist. I recognized her from a podcast interview I had listened to while editing one of their earlier videos. I remembered the softness of her voice, the way she explained digital radicalization, like she was trying to save people who didn't know they were already drowning. The attached note said, "Remove the name. Remove the badge. No hero narrative." So they knew. They knew she was known. They didn't want her to be a person. They wanted her to be content. I sat there with my hands on the keyboard. This time my body refused to cooperate. I didn't edit it. I didn't open another file. I unplugged the new laptop and shoved it into my closet like it was a live animal. I left my apartment with my wallet and keys and nothing else. I walked to the busiest place I could think of, a shopping center. I sat on a bench between a pharmacy and a shoe store and tried to think. The dark web has always felt like a different universe to people, a myth with a modem. But sitting there among normal shoppers, I realized the real terror of it. It isn't separate. It's threaded through the same world. The same streets, same elevators, same dull apartment hallways. I bought a cheap phone with cash. I created a new email. I wrote a message to the journalist's public tip line. I kept it short. I didn't mention the site name. I didn't mention my role. I just wrote, "I believe you are in danger because of your investigations into dark web violence networks. Stop traveling alone. Tell your editor." I hit send. Then I threw the phone into a public trash bin and walked away. I don't know if the message reached her in time. I don't know if it mattered. I do know that when I returned to my apartment that night, my door was already open. The lights were on. The new laptop sat on my table again. Opened. Waiting. A message on screen. "You tried to be a person." Underneath it, "People are easy to edit out." I stood in the doorway long enough to understand the room wasn't safe. That staying meant being folded back into their workflow. That leaving meant I might disappear in a different way. I went to the closet. The laptop was gone. In its place was a chair. The same chair from my orientation clip, positioned to face my window. On the seat was a simple paper card. Episode 163. Local. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I already understood what it meant. My mouth went dry with a kind of fear that was almost calm. Not panic. Clarity. They were not warning me anymore. They were demonstrating scale. They were reminding me that the boundary between the editor and the edited was a convenience they could revoke. I walked out. I left my keys on the kitchen counter. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. I kept walking. I didn't go to a friend's place. I didn't go to a hotel. I went to the only kind of place that feels invisible in a city. A hospital lobby. I sat under fluorescent lights that make everyone look tired and honest. I found a security guard and told him I was being threatened by an organized group. I told him I had evidence on a laptop at home. I told him I was afraid to return. He looked skeptical. Then he looked at my face longer. Then he made a call. 2 hours later, I was talking to people who asked better questions. They didn't smile. They didn't advise therapy. They didn't treat fear like a mood. I told them pieces. I still couldn't say everything. There's shame that gets welded to you when you've helped polish something evil. But I said enough to make them understand that this wasn't an online prank. I gave them my address. I told them about the chair. I told them about the structure of the portal. I told them about the logo. I told them about Kay. When we got back to my apartment, it had been cleaned the way criminals clean, only when they have a system. The chair was gone. The laptop was gone. The closet was empty. No fingerprints. No forced entry. No evidence I could point to without sounding broken. But in the kitchen sink, the same sink I'd thrown up in weeks ago, was a small sealed plastic bag. Inside it was a USB drive and a note. Final cut attached. The detective opened the bag with gloves. He looked at me. "Do you want us to view this now?" I said no, because I knew what they wanted from that drive. Not my silence, not my fear, my participation again. They wanted me to be the one to open it so the story of what happened next would loop back through my hands, so that even if I escaped, a part of me would stay leveraged forever. The drive went into evidence. They moved me to a temporary place. They started an investigation that I'm not allowed to talk about in detail. What I can say is that nothing ends cleanly in a business like that. Because a system doesn't collapse just because one cog screams. Weeks later, in a safe apartment with different walls and different locks, I received an email from an unknown address. No greeting, no threat, just a link preview image that didn't load, and a sentence beneath it. "You taught us your taste." I deleted it. Then I sat on my floor and shook so hard my teeth hurt, because the sentence was more personal than any explicit threat. It meant they had watched me react, watched what I cut quickly, watched what I lingered on. They had studied not just my work, but my conscience, and they were suggesting something I couldn't bear to consider. That even my disgust had been useful, that my skill was not a mistake they exploited, but a trait they had selected. I don't edit video anymore. I can't. Even wedding footage makes my stomach go tight because I'm afraid of what might be hidden in the audio, in the shadows, in the empty seconds between smiles. Sometimes I dream I'm back at the timeline, zooming in, trimming frames, trying to remove something I can't name. In the dream, I'm not editing violence. I'm editing myself, cutting out the parts that hesitated, cutting out the parts that obeyed, cutting out the parts that needed the money badly enough to step into hell and call it a job. I wake up with the taste of dread in my mouth, and the worst truth sits with me as I wash my face and try to look like someone who belongs in daylight. I wasn't hired because I was desperate. I was hired because I was good. And somewhere out there, a brand that looks like a white blade or a tooth is still uploading on schedule, still clean, still consistent, still counting on the fact that the world is full of talented people with overdue rent, and that the distance between "I need the money" and I'll do the work is shorter than anyone wants to admit.